And welcome to Civil Discourse. I'm Jayme Wojciechowski, and today I am here with Lynne Maureen Hurdle, who is also known as the conflict closer. And today we are discussing how to resolve conflict between family members and friends who have been having issues with this election. And would you just like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to become a conflict resolution strategist?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jayme, so much for the opportunity. I am Lynne Maureen Hurdle, 30 years into the work of conflict resolution, really fell into it. It was not a conscious choice. I make a lot more conscious choices these days. I was a theater major and was really looking for some other way to apply my theater work, and found out about nonviolent conflict and change, and the fact that I could actually do some role playing using the work. And so I decided that I was interested in finding out how people change things through nonviolence. And that really led me into going out on my own and being a consultant, because, as you know, conflict is everywhere. And so I had the opportunity to really work with people all over the world, helping them to resolve conflict and actually helping them to learn how to resolve conflict, one meaningful response at a time.
That's
That's
interesting because
interesting because
I'm
I'm
also an actor, um, and it's interesting in theater how everything's also about conflict. That's the root of
Yes.
everything. So how did you see that kind of move into your work dealing with conflict? Did you find that you were able to pinpoint things easier, or
People like to see that you know what you're talking about when it comes to conflict and them. And for me, I felt like so many people are either theater or movie people. They really want to see the conflict. And so I just started putting together what I call reality role plays. And I would listen to what the situations were for the people who brought me in to help them resolve conflict. And I'd start to just either, if I was working with a team, have them do role plays around the real situations, or I'd call someone up in the audience and say, okay, we're going to role play this. And I want it to be real. And that resonated with a lot of people because they were able to not only see it, but then we could do all kinds of things, stop, freeze frame it, rework it, really feed off of using skills right within the workshop, because the role play was happening live.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
interesting on this
interesting.
show. I talk quite often about how we as a society tend to like to look at surface issues and not dig deeper to find the core of what's actually going on.
Yeah.
In your experience, do you find that there is often a common core to the conflict you're trying to resolve, that at the root it's similar between all the different conflict you're seeing, or do you see that it's very different based on the specific type of conflict you're dealing with?
Every conflict is different, regardless if the topic is the same. Because people are different. And what I find really is at the core is there are a couple of things. One, feelings. And if we aren't into those, if we aren't talking about those, if we aren't acknowledging those, then the conflict often doesn't get resolved. Whether you want to talk about feelings or not, they're there. The other thing is what's the genesis? What's the origin of this conflict? It's often some kind of wound that was unattended, whether it's with the person you're in conflict with now, or whether it's with 4 or 5 people ago, or 6 to 10 years ago. There's often that, what's the origin? Why does this particular thing set you off, and why did it set you off now?
Yeah, and shifting to the election,
Yeah.
it's been interesting, and I've talked a lot about this. Um, it feels like over the past many decades, we've been becoming a society more and more partisan and pushed to two different sides, and I think we've hit uh, a peak point with that. And I find specifically now I'm seeing a lot of people who just have decided that anyone who disagrees with them, I see it a lot as a progressive. I've seen a lot of progressives basically say they're going to cut out anyone in their family who's voted for Trump, and
Mm.
I've seen it on the other side as well. And what do you think? Why do you think that is, and what's the miscommunication that's happening there?
This particular election, it's like no other that I have seen, and in particular with regard to what you're talking about, that people, I'm on Facebook a lot, people are unfriending people, and people who are uh, people I find to be in the line of work where there should be diversity of opinions. Uh, and so families are breaking up and relationships are breaking up over this, and I believe that the difference for a lot of people is they really feel like the campaign was run on hate. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the easiest way to say it, because you
And we are back. We had some technical difficulties, but we are all here now. So we were talking about the election, and it's seeming like there are a lot more conflicts that are arising within families and between loved ones, um, based on political differences,
yeah.
specifically who they're voting for. And you were talking about you thinking a lot of it comes from the rhetoric that was used during the election that was really fueled by hate.
Yeah. I definitely feel that what people are, what I'm hearing people say is that you can't love me and support someone for president who is saying the things that he's saying about other people. And so it feels really a very strong betrayal, tremendous hurt. It then affects friendships for people as well. So here, if you are saying my family is voting for someone who I really cannot let stand the things that they're saying, it also affects what my friends think of me if I let that slide. And so this is very different and very personal for people. It's not a difference of politics. It really is people feeling this is a hate campaign, and I just really cannot allow that. But one of the things that I want to say that I think is really interesting is I think that if people really search themselves, they will admit that there are people that we love in our families who've been saying hateful things for a very long time, our whole lives, some of us. And while we might go, oh, please don't say that, or we had not unfriended them or dismissed them as family members before
Mm-hmm.
now. Maybe some people do have family that they don't talk to, but then they weren't talking to them before this election anyway. But I'm just saying that I think it's really important that we also think about that. And perhaps for people, it's reached a peak where they just feel like, no, it's ignited some really horrible things. So therefore, I really cannot take this from you anymore. But I do not think that for many people, it's the first time that they've heard family members express this. And there may be some surprises of some family members who you did not think would support him. But I don't think that people could honestly in their hearts say that they've never had anyone that they loved say hurtful, hateful things about other groups of people.
Yeah, it's interesting for me because I agree with everything you're saying, and that does seem to be on the progressive end. It seems to be what's fueling the conflict on that side is the idea that anyone who supported Trump um, is endorsing the rhetoric he used. And it's interesting because on the other side, I've spoken to an endless amount of Trump supporters over the past year and a half.
Right,
And the vast majority of people that I've spoken to are not fond of the rhetoric, but
right,
they're in a position where we've had similar policies for multiple decades that have been slowly degrading their lifestyle, and they're seeing the country people having a harder and harder time um, just just making it. So I think on their end they just want their thinking behind it was any change is better than going on the path that we're on. So they're able to say to themselves, well, yes, I don't necessarily agree with that, but if it's between the two people and I have to pick between change and it's unpredictable change I don't know and someone who they feel is going to take them on the same path we're on that they feel is a downward path, they pick the change. So it's an interesting dynamic then because both sides in a way are correct about the other side, but they're not taking into account what's actually at the core of the person they're in conflict with.
yeah. Yes, I do have friends who I have not unfriended, who are Trump supporters, and I've had some conversations, long conversations back and forth with them, and they do have reasons beyond the rhetoric for why they voted for him. And there are a lot of different reasons out there. And I think that part of what is happening is that people, because of the rhetoric, are feeling like there's no good reason. I don't
Mm-hmm.
care what your reason is. There's no good reason to support hate. And so that then brings this piece into it for people. But one of the things that I know that we had connected around was mindfulness. And just for me, I think it's so important for people to really be mindful of what is this really about for us, to the place that we are willing on both sides to hurt family and friends, and hurt either by supporting someone who has the rhetoric and then not really taking into consideration what that means for other people, or on the other side to just say, I'm done with you, or I'm not talking to you, and not taking into account what that honestly does mean for you. I think there's not a lot of mindfulness happening. And I agree that it's really tough to sit and listen to the hate and to watch what's happening
Mm-hmm.
around hate in this country. It absolutely is. But I also, for myself, and it's because what I do, it's because I deal with conflict and have for 30 years and have had to hold so many energies, even energies of people that don't particularly care for me as an African American, as a woman, as a person who's probably considered plus size, as a you name it, a short person, you name it. I, I've had to hold those energies in order to listen. Perhaps it's a little less painful for me. I won't say it isn't painful, but I do feel like I think we need everyone if we
Mm-hmm.
are going to make major change. And I don't want to cut people off. Do I want people who are really hateful and hurtful in my space or in other people's space and hurting them. No, I do not want that. But I do believe that what's happening with a lot of family members is these are not people who are going out there and committing those acts. I know some people are out there. Clearly, they're somebody's family member. But for the most part, I think what we're seeing are families who are really disagreeing over this, not going out there and hurting people
Yeah.
physically. So I think that that requires then that people really think about and be fully present with what they're doing and saying to one another.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been saying very similar things. I've been talking a lot about mindfulness being understanding and how yes, the anger that's involved is valid, but if you want to actually solve the issue, we have to move to a place of understanding, or you just fuel the flames. You get this back and forth between one side calling the other side racist or sexist or
Right.
a bigot because of who they voted for or their political leanings, and those people, even if they are, don't feel like they're that way, so they take offense to it and then attack back, and it gets this escalated thing where no one even can't talk to each other, but they just don't understand or can't communicate, and they can't function together. It's just constant. It's a constant collide and a constant back and forth, and then nothing ever gets done. You just get stuck on that kind of surface problem.
Right. I think people really need to pay attention and try to understand the places where they agree. I think we're no longer going to that place. I think we're stopping at, oh, you voted for Trump, or you were going to vote for him, because certainly before he was even elected, this was happening, that people were cutting each other off, or oh, you're calling me a racist, or whatever it is you're calling me. So now I've closed my ears, my heart, everything on both sides. And I am in good relationships, friendships. It's not been my family, but friendships with people, because I go to those places where we do have common ground and common agreement. And in fact, those places are so strong that it amazes me at times that you voted for it. Like that amazes me, because we are so, the places where we agree are so strong. But to me, that's also fascinating that we can be on this really opposite side of things. This is beyond Republican and Democrat and anything else that you want to call yourself politically, that we can be on that opposite side and still see the places where we agree and come together in those places.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about the what I see as the core difference between the political ideologies on both sides, and it seems like, at least for me, on the left side, there seems to be a focus on justice,
Hmm.
on how to be fair, how equality, these kind of just creating a just society. And on the right, it seems to be a focus on liberty, which is
Mm.
personal liberty and um, personal responsibility and those kind of things, which is interesting because really to have a functioning society that is prosperous, you need both of those things working together, which then you see like why we're having all these issues in politically. And I think I often say politically, but it's really just a symptom of the way we react to each other on a human level, because
Yeah.
the government isn't a thing that exists. It's people. So if we change the way people behave and interact with one another, the government would respond because it's made up of people.
Right. I love that tweet you did on that. Yeah. I agree with
Oh,
that.
yes.
Yeah.
Good. So
Yes.
it's
And that's been an issue for a very long time. That's the thing. For me, what this is about is old wounds never healed and
mhm.
skills never learned as a result of it. So it really is that we have not had good ways of communicating and relating with one another. I don't think ever. It's why I do what I do. Excuse me. So that now has arisen to this place where this is huge. And had we had the foundation to really communicate with one another all along, we wouldn't be at this spot,
Yeah.
not the way
So
we are now.
how do you think
Because
we move
we'd
forward?
have that opportunity, we'd have the skills, we'd have the willingness to really listen and understand. And people, it's just incredible to me what I'm seeing. And then people saying, I really want to try to listen, but I just am not going to support hatefulness. So it's hard to listen
Yeah.
because it feels like I'm supporting hatefulness.
Yeah. When I often talk about mindfulness and I'll talk about compassion, understanding, it's interesting that a lot of what I hear from people is this assumption that by being compassionate or leading with understanding, it means that I have to agree with or accept behavior or accept what's going on. And it for me, it doesn't have, you don't have to accept it to be compassionate or to understand it. Understanding is more about fixing the problem, knowing what's going on so we can fix the problem. You can understand something without condoning it. And it's
Right.
weird that these two things seem to, in the minds of most people in our country, from my experiences at least, it seems like they link the two together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I think about that as you say that. I think about as a parent. My role as a parent is to understand. I understand my teenager. I have two sons, one's 21, one's 15. I understand them when they disagree with a decision that I've made. Uh, it doesn't mean that I'm going to then condone that they should behave a certain way that I've absolutely not raised them to behave. Do I understand where that comes from for them? Maybe it's your friends are doing this. Yep, I understand that. It doesn't mean that I'm going along with that. So those are separate for me, and those have always been separate. I don't believe that my understanding where something is coming from means that I condone the way a person tries to go about achieving that, right? Or that I can't understand that they don't see it the way that I see it, even
Mm-hmm.
if it is hate. I have to say that I know that it's really hard to take that position, but I I absolutely can say that I have listened to some people and I get where they're coming from because of the life they've lived, but
Mm-hmm.
that does not mean that I condone it or I'm willing to say that's not hate. That does not mean that. But can I get why they've come to that place? Yes. And part of it for me is about stories. It's about connecting through the stories of the why you got to where you got, how you got, where you got there. And even though we may be in families and people may be siblings that are disagreeing and who were raised with under the same roof, and so someone cannot understand why a sibling might feel that way, why a parent, and I think generationally you have to be able to understand why people see things very differently. But when it's a sibling, it may be very different. But the truth is that siblings raised under the same roof often turn out differently. Their
Yeah.
perspectives are just different, and the time in which they were raised and the energy or whatever the parent learned or hadn't learned, they're all they all intertwine into why siblings see it differently.
Yeah, and I just had a thought with the election. It's you keep talking about the hate, and I am trying to thinking about the Trump campaign and what was behind it. And really, the Trump campaign was a fear campaign that was meant to then move into hate. They
Mm-hmm.
used hate to and I think fear, and then the hate came out of that fear. And it's interesting because when I'm trying to think of what the similarities between the Clinton campaign and the Trump campaign was, on in the Clinton campaign, there wasn't the hate element, but there was the fear element.
Right.
The core of her campaign was also fear Trump and these other people.
Right.
We have to stop them. So it's interesting that the campaigns themselves, now I can see, oh, both of them at the core were both feeding on the fear of the people on their respective sides, just in very different ways. And you can argue one is worse than the other, obviously, but at the core, it's it's interesting because now I'm seeing more clearly where the conflicts within relationships and within the electorate is coming from.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely, again, though, well, maybe not again, but this is a fear-based nation. And our media
Right.
is
Mm-hmm.
all fear-based, and it's meant to keep people in fear rather than informed, and rather in connection with one another, so that we do know each other's stories, and we do feel that connection. So I don't think that it was bound to be any different. I think
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of election campaigns have been run on fear, again, because of this country, and so fear then, as you said, then turned into this whole piece on hate. But uh, while it wasn't on the Clinton side fully directed at specific groups of people and
Mm-hmm.
specific remarks about who people really are, as she herself said, the deplorables was over the top. And to even go to that space, to even be willing to do that kind of name calling, says that fear can very easily turn into hate, or certainly into name calling, no question at all.
Yeah, and it's difficult because I also talk a lot about the media and how our society is exactly what you're saying. It's very set up to propagate fear. So, how do you feel like we begin to combat that or to change it, if not as a nation on an individual level?
I think that we really, I want to go back to mindfulness again, and to really say that I think that there's some tremendous value to it. And I think that we have to be willing to make that commitment to start with self. And because we're reaching out or lashing out or however it is we're doing to other people, but are we really mindful about what's happening for ourselves? And I think that that's the place that I would love for people to start, is to pause for a minute, more than a minute perhaps, and to really think about being fully present with yourself and what it is that you're feeling. One of the things that I've been doing since the election, the day after election, is I've been saying to people, please tune in and feel your feelings, and do not let anyone take that space from you, because we as a society just don't tend to do that. We just keep plugging along and moving on, and then we don't heal wounds. And so I think that at the first place I would go is self. And what is this about for me? Why do I feel the way I feel? And what is it that I understand about what this means for me? I understand that that it means that my children may be under attack, or it means that that I am not comfortable with people anymore. I'm looking around over my shoulder, whatever. I don't know what it means for each person, but I think we ought to understand what it means. Does it mean that I'm hurt? Does it mean that as an African American, I'm hurt because the numbers of white people and educated white people who voted for Trump caught me by surprise, because I wanted to believe that we were past that. And I tried to, and maybe I even did, and now I'm hurt or betrayed. Or again, I think everybody's got to really tune in for themselves, because one of the ways that you help people understand you is for you first to understand you, because I think it's easier to come from a place of this is wrong than to come from a place of what is this for me? What's my
Mm-hmm.
story in this? My parents were immigrants, or my husband is Muslim, or whatever that is. Because when you start to connect on that level, I think it speaks differently to people's hearts. But we can't get to that place because we are reacting as opposed to responding. And in response, for me, I'm asking people on my Facebook page, I ask people, can you give me one meaningful response right now? One meaningful response to this election for you, to someone who you want to understand where you're coming from. What's one meaningful response? And I think it's hard for people.
Yeah. What I love about what you're saying is I feel most people, when they react emotionally, do one of two things. They either try to shut off the emotion, or
Yeah.
they are controlled by the emotion and they let the emotion take them on a wild ride. And what you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about is not is it letting yourself feel, not trying to hide or run away or close off those emotions, but
Right.
self-reflecting on what those emotions mean and bringing mindfulness into it. I think that's the the key, because once you, exactly what you said, once you understand how you're feeling, you'll be able to express that to other people in a way that leads with understanding for them, because you led through understanding for yourself, as
Right.
opposed to leading with
Yeah.
attacking.
Yeah. Yes. And I and one of the things I think that happened too for people who voted for Trump is that they didn't want to say that they were going to vote for him because it felt unsafe. And I know that for people who 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 know that Trump created this unsafeness for for other people. I know people may cringe when they hear me say that how they felt unsafe, but I do believe that to be true.
Mm-hmm.
Unsafe to voice what they were thinking and feeling.
Yeah.
And I think that if we really love each other, and we're talking about family members and really value them, then we can hold space for them in either direction. There's some people, I had an on Facebook conversation with someone who I said, I see you, I see the anger, and I can hold space for that, that I'm not in that place, but I can hold space for that. And he said, I don't know what's happening to me, but this has made me, the anger in me, I've never seen like this before. And so I said, so then experience that, because if you don't, then it's going to be much worse, because you won't know where you're coming from and why and what this even really means to you. You will just only know that you're angry. And so I think that he a lot of people might be turning off people who are that angry. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want that in my space. And then where do they then have the opportunity to come back to if we've cut them off? And again, I know that that is not an easy thing to do, but I truly believe that we've got to be able to hold that kind of energy, but we can't do it until we really are honest and hold our own energy for ourselves and know what it is it means to us. And don't push ourselves to move past it until, not even past it, until we've moved through it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that you might take 2 weeks. I might take a month or a year. I mean, it might really be that long for me. And that's why I'm encouraging people to let people take their space and their time. And this urgency of we have to do something now, I understand that, but you cannot. Again, we're recreating the same thing. We did not heal wounds. We never have. We've not had the conversations. And so if we handle this in the same way, we're going to be in the same place.
Yeah, what I loved that you brought up was the about your friends who supported Trump who said they didn't say anything because they felt unsafe,
Yeah.
and you then commenting about how other people would be offended by that, the idea that they would feel unsafe. And
Right.
what's interesting to me is that we live in a society where people feel so disconnected, but that disconnection is just an illusion, and we're actually completely interconnected, whether we feel like we are or not. And what I see now after the election was a, a focus on where do we place the blame. And
Yeah.
very few people that I've seen have said, well, what part did I play in it? Because if we're
Hmm.
all interconnected, somehow my behavior helped that. And that's what I'm thinking about when you were talking about Trump supporters feeling unsafe, was if the progressives had led with mindfulness and understanding, would they have been able to talk to people and express how they felt in a way where people could have said, oh, I'm actually thinking of supporting Trump because of this, this, and this. And maybe it had nothing to do with the racism or the sexism or the bigotry or any of that stuff. It was specific economic or whatever it was. Then we could have had a meaningful conversation and potentially changed minds or changed the direction of what was going in. But because we just went so forceful in labeling people, they felt scared, and then they retracted, and then everybody was shocked when all these people came out for Trump and no one knew about it.
Right. Yes. I mean, it's really interesting because the way that I found out the first person was a Trump supporters because I was talking about this whole unfriending thing, and I said, wow, I just really don't like that approach. I would love to find out why someone's supporting Trump, fully thinking in my mind that he was not.
Yeah.
And he heard the truth in that statement, and he said, well, I'm supporting him. And I said, wow, okay, then I'm listening. Let me sit down and listen. And that's how the conversations began. And once I then did a blog about it, and other people then approached me and reached out to me to say thank you because I haven't felt safe to say, what resonates or whatever. I said, oh my goodness, we're missing this. These are conversations that are not taking place. And I said, I believe, and I knew this in my heart. I said he's going to be the president, and I really want people to get ready for that because nobody's believing me, and nobody believed me when I said that in March. But the reason I said it is because these people were coming out of hiding, telling me that they were going to vote for him, or certainly were considering it seriously. And I knew that they were not able to have the conversation. So, yes, as you have said, I wasn't trying to talk anyone into or out of anything, but I was trying to be heard as well as to listen to them. And so for me, I'm happy that that still exists because we should be continuing the conversations. And if nothing else, I would like to have those conversations, even though, as people have said, so you voted, you were willing to look past what the hatred is or the rhetoric is in order to go after what your interest was. I hear that, and I understand that perspective on it, but I'm not willing to close the door on folks. I'm just not willing to close the door, or not on the conversation. I'm willing to close the door if you're trying to do ugly, nasty things, yes, but
Hmm.
not if you're willing to have the conversation.
Yeah. And just, I mean, we've said it multiple times, but if you do close the door, you're closing the door. You're basically stopping any potential progress. You can't
Right.
progress if you close the door. So, and I mean, imagine if that's what it was. If we were having these conversations and we found out, well, people are overlooking the rhetoric because they're worried about the economy and their jobs and all these other things that they did, we could have addressed that as the progressive party or the Democrats or whatever you want to call it, and it could have been the same way on the other side. It's not one side doing it and the other side not. It has to be a team effort, but it also has to be the individuals. And if one side ends up reaching out first, that's not. I know neither side wants to do it because of ego. The ego gets in the way of it, but it's the harder choice, but it's going to be the much more effective choice to do that.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm sure we have plenty of people who disagree with us. I'm certain of that. And that to me is what this is about, that people are going to come to it in different perspectives. But I do believe that there was a great missed opportunity long before Election Day to actually listen, understand, and try to see where people might get their needs met in a way that wasn't about being so hateful. Or And I agree that I think that on the Clinton side, that opportunity was missed. And that does not mean that I dismiss that there were many people who never would want to see a woman as president. I don't dismiss that. I know how strong that is, particularly behind our first African American president. I understand all of that, get that, and don't disagree that that's there. But I do feel like there are many people that, had we kept the door open, would have had the conversations. I had conversations with many different people. And as I said, I wasn't going into it to change either way. I just really wanted to understand, and I wanted them to give me the chance to understand me.
Yeah. So just in closing, I what would you give as advice to someone who's feeling overwhelmed or depressed or just confused about the, the election and just themselves and moving forward and all those things that's just lost.
hmm I think that it's important to really be mindful of where you are, what are you feeling, and why. Honor that. You may be very depressed. I know for myself, for my son, I want them. to be around people who are doing the work of trying to create change, because I think that when you feel hopeless, you have to see that there are lots of other people out there that are moving forward in ways that you would be wanting to and willing to move forward. But I do think that you first have to honor where you are, and that you have to find people that you can have conversations with that are beyond how much you hate, despise, or the people who put this man in this position, but really about what this means for you and what are your fears and thoughts of what it's going to mean for the country. And then how do you want to move forward when it's time for you to want to move forward. But I do think that you have to check in every single day. You have to be mindful about where you are every day, and then you have to find what is that you can be grateful for about yourself and what you have to offer to make change, because we all have something that we can offer to make change, and we've got to find that place for ourselves while honoring what we're really feeling about this. And if I could offer that, if we could start looking for the folks who are really doing the work of trying to take fear off the table for folks. And I know that we'll never live in a way where we have no fear, but I do think that there's a lot of I'm terrified, and I'm not taking that from folks. But if that's the only space that we're working from, then that's going to be very stressful and hard on us personally, and we won't have the strength or the health to go forward with whatever changes we really do want to see made.
Yeah, I love all of that and agree with it all. Well, thank you so much. You can connect with Lynn on Twitter at Conflict Closer, and I also recommend I watched your TED Talk and I loved it. So watch
Thank you.
her TED Talk on her website, lynnemarienhurdle.com.
Thank you.
Okay, you're
Oh, Jayme,
welcome.
I'm so honored. Thank you. This was such a great conversation, and that's what I'm so hungry for right now
Good,
are
good,
more
right?
conversations. Yes.
Yes. And
Thank you for
join
having me.
me on Twitter as well, at Jayme Woj or at Civil D TV, and or on Facebook, and continue the conversation, because if you have a different viewpoint or something you want to add or something you don't understand that you want to understand more, we would love to keep that conversation going. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much.
Thank you.